Hi there, and welcome to episode 3 of the Remote Lounge. My name's Gavin Clark, and I'm CEO of Remote Solutions. And in today's session, we are going to discuss the next generation of event professionals and how that looks, focusing on the workforce and the possible impacts of future technology, including robotics, AI, and the metaverse. So with that, I'm really pleased to welcome Rachel Nicholson from Backstage Academy and Alistair Barton from SWM Partners. So thank you very much both. Thank you for joining me today. So before we get started, let's hear a little bit more about yourself, Rachel. So if you'd like to give us a little bit of your bio there.
Thanks, Gavin. So I'm Rachel Nicholson. I am Head of Institution at Backstage Academy. Backstage Academy is a higher education provider based in Wakefield on Production Park. So we have postgraduate, undergraduate and short professional courses catered for the live events industry. I've been working in the live events industry since last century, which is embarrassing to say. But I've been in education for nearly 20 years now and enjoy trying to bring forward the next generation to help keep our industry fantastic.
That's wonderful, and really, really pleased to have you a part of that. It's always great to have people from the education sector part of these events, as we've got to encourage more people into this sector. So over to you, Alistair, as well. Let's hear a little bit more about you.
Thanks for having me, Gavin, and hello to everyone listening. Like Gavin said, my name's Alistair Barton, and I work for SWM Partners. I've worked in the events industry for just over 10 years now, worked my way right up from doing venue search all the way into the role that I'm doing now, which in this century looks like providing virtual and technological solutions to medical and pharmaceutical companies, all to help them with their clinical trials and get patients testing drugs and hopefully solutions rolled out to the people who need them.
Wonderful. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And actually, a bit of a background, Alistair and I have worked together for many years, and I've seen Alistair move his way up through the ranks over the years as well. So it's really great to have you part of that. So, and let's start off with the questions. Now, question number 1 really is around, if somebody new was coming into the sector, what would be the key bit of advice that that you would give them, or what sort of words would you use to encourage them into this sector? Now, I'll go over to you first, Rachel.
Thanks, Kevin. I think one of the key things I would advise somebody is not to be afraid to be a pioneer. One of the most amazing things about our industry is that it changes so often, so frequently, and in so many diverse ways. And that's, if you're excited by that and you're excited by the opportunity for change and excited to be part of that change, then don't be put off because something hasn't already been done. If you get the sense that actually something is new, innovative, exciting, that's where you want to be. That's where you want to position yourself. So I think one of the things that I would say is don't be afraid to be a pioneer, and also on your journey find the best mentors you can to help you keep learning.
No, that's great as well. And what about in terms of kind of sourcing education as well? Where do people go to look to find where there's colleges, where there's sort of educational places to go? Where would you recommend people have a look first?
I think, I'm afraid to say, I think that there is a bit of variation across the country. So I think some areas of the country are better catered for than others. But I do think there's a range of different opportunities, depending on the type of person that you are. Your pathway into the industry, mine was through working at my local venue and working my way up and then going and following a degree pathway, and that worked for me, but that might not be the right and the best approach for somebody else. Now, thankfully, there's a lot more apprenticeship opportunities available for people as well as a more diverse range of different degree courses, or not necessarily degree, but further education courses as well. So I think it's down to the individual and looking at the range of things that are available to them. There's a great government website that can help direct you to all the different types of things that are available, but realizing that you yourself have some choice and have some choice about finding out what's right for you, and the pathway that was right for somebody else might not be the one that's right for you, but you've got to actively make that choice, and there's no such thing as the right choice. You've just got to make a choice and then put the effort in to make it the right choice for you.
Absolutely. And I think, looking at the way the generation have changed, when I was certainly at school, there wasn't these opportunities. Yes, there was apprenticeships, but, nobody really kind of gave me an opportunity to steer or know what's out there. So I think personally, it's great. One, there's courses out there. One, there's, education centres that people can go to, further education, things at school, as well as that opportunity for apprenticeships. And I'm a big fan of that form of education, learning on the job.
And I think one of the best ways for finding out, and I don't know whether you'd agree with me, but I still think actually just speaking to people in the industry, people are incredibly generous with their time and opinions. And they, you can canvass quite a lot of ideas about what is available out there, and also, get some contacts with people, get introduced to different places, different venues, different opportunities. So I think speaking to people in the industry is perhaps one of the best ways of finding out what's available.
Exactly. And maybe sometimes just a simple Google search, AV production companies in your area, event management companies in your area, do a Google search, call people up, speak to people. And, for me as a CEO, I'm really keen to bring new people into the sector. So I think, that is a nice, easy way just to kind of build those networks and get those introductions. So over to you, Alistair, as well. What would you say to people kind of coming into the industry?
Well, Gavin, I'm so glad that apprenticeships have already been mentioned, because actually that's how I found my way into the events industry. I did an apprenticeship in business administration, but it was part of the events company that I used to work at, which is MD Group. And it gave me a really excellent and practical foundation to start my career on. So I'm more of a practical person in the sense of picking up practical skills, giving things a go. My sort of learning style is less about learning about them in a classroom and more about trying to do things in practice. So definitely look at apprenticeships, as you and Rachel have already addressed. I also think volunteering is a great way to get a flavour for the industry. So perhaps if someone's listening to this and thinking, do you know what, I've already started down a career path and I'm a bit worried, I think I might like to try events instead. At least with volunteering, it can supplement alongside any career. It doesn't have to be just that it's experience alongside an events career. You can try volunteering at an event alongside something you're already doing to try and find out if it's the right thing for you to do. So many charities, probably one of the biggest fundraisers out there that they can do is throwing their events. They're always looking for people to volunteer, to be stewards, to help with production, to help with stage sourcing. And I do this on a regular basis. Obviously, I'm in the events industry still, but I love going to other events and volunteering my time there as well, because it helps me develop, helps me learn different skills that I wouldn't necessarily have picked up in the companies that I'm working for on a paid income basis. So yeah, definitely look at volunteering. Echo what you guys saying as well about contacting local companies, networking. There's always value in just asking a question, and don't be afraid to ask a question. And also don't be too intimidated by how much is involved. We've already talked about here the AV production side of it, Gavin. Someone mentioned venues earlier. I work on the agency side. The event industry is huge. It's not just one single person or company planning these events. It's loads of vendors and suppliers coming together to put on the event. And you don't need to know every skill set within each of those companies, but certainly finding out how the structure of it works and where your skill set might sit in that event life cycle is a really good idea, but don't be intimidated by that.
No, I think that's a really good point. There's so many facets, isn't there, to the events sector, whether it be technical, whether it be logistical. And, I've just kind of broadly said that, there's so many facets there that actually, you may not be the strongest technical person, or you may not be the most logistical person, but there's so many different areas that need help. You've got the creative side of things there as well, which are all really important aspects of the events there. Thank you both very much for that response there. I think that's just so insightful, and even more so now. There is a shortage of skills, it's particularly in our sector. So I'm sure, like all companies, we are really actively encouraging more people to get involved, as we are desperately needed those skill set there. Great. So moving on to the next question as well. So there's always that ongoing dilemma: education versus experience. So kind of, we've got both sides of the equation there, which is really great. So Alistair, coming to you first, what do you think? Education, experience, what do you think is more poignant there?
I definitely think it depends on the individual. As I answered the question before, I consider myself a more practical person. I learn hands on the job versus sort of in a classroom environment, but that has to suit the individual and also the kind of role that you're looking to go towards as well. I don't think there's one kind of universal balance of, 100% education or 50% of each. But I definitely, if I'm sort of looking at people that I'm recruiting for a role, I value both in terms of having education, but also having experience, because education shows that you're ready to put sort of formal qualifications to what it is, what you want to learn, whereas the experience kind of shows, that you have the practical skills, skill set, and able to execute whatever that task might be. And even more so, I've already talked about volunteering, but to plug it a little bit more, even more so if you do have volunteering experience on your CV, that's even more of a bigger tick, because that shows me that you're doing something that you love. You want to work in an area that you love because you're giving up your personal time and giving it to the events industry in order to help make that and put that event on, and also learn for yourself and your own personal development.
No, I think I couldn't agree with you more. I'm a big believer in the experience side. It's lovely to see that education on the piece of paper. It gives you such a great foundation, and shows your kind of ethics there going forward with having that education on there and then that hands-on approach. But it's difficult, isn't it? Because how do you get experience without the educational piece? So kind of having that balance there is always a little bit of a struggle. So over to you, Rachel. Your thoughts on education versus experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, it's a really complex question and a really important one. And for me, whenever I get asked this question, which, as you can imagine, I do a lot, I always think, rather than just thinking about the start of somebody's career, I think about the journey of that career itself. And I think that the relationship with education and experience is ongoing, because education is about broadening and giving more depth to your knowledge, your understanding, and the experience is about being able to apply that and come back with better questions that you then need more education for. So all the way, I think a good practitioner is somebody who engages with both of those things throughout their career, and whether that be in a structured and formal environment, or whether that be something that they're doing themselves, they're teaching themselves, and they're taking the time in order to pursue particular areas of interest. It's something that I think really is a sign of a successful practitioner. I think in terms of sort of formal and structured education, I'd agree with that. It depends how you like to learn, and finding the right learning environment for you is as important. And it's the same in terms of the experience side of things, because you've got to have the right mentors around you, the right opportunities, the right experiences to keep pushing you further forwards. And so I think, obviously at Backstage, we have a much more practical hands-on learning style that might suit somebody, like yourself, Al, as opposed to a more conventional university university kind of education, because for us it's about that integrated work-based learning kind of environment, which is why we're on Production Park. But it's about finding out what's right for you at different points in your career and in your life. And sometimes actually at the start of your life, what you think you're going to go on and do isn't necessarily where you end up. And I see you laughing, because I'm sure that, Gavin, that your stories are similar to the rest of us, that we all started somewhere thinking we were going to go in one direction, and the industry is so diverse and ever changing, and there are so many opportunities, and you learn about yourself as well, that as you go through, you develop yourself and you sculpt yourself into the person, the practitioner you want to be. So I would say that it's not a dilemma, it's an opportunity, and it's an ongoing relationship between those two things, but you need both.
And I think that's a really good kind of point to sort of drum home that, some people kind of think education, it means I'm going to be sat in a classroom just learning from textbooks. And actually, what you do at Backstage there just shows that actually it's not just about that. You have those hands-on opportunities there. Yes, there's some textbooks part of it, of course, because you've got to pass your degree there. But a big part of that is that hands-on. So kind of don't be put off by the education type approach.
Absolutely.
You do have that mix there.
Yeah, and I think it's important to be able to learn and develop the skills of both, because actually at different points in your life you might need to write a proposal or a paper and feel confident being able to do that. There's a range of different skills that both kind of give you. So it's an opportunity, but it's what you choose to make of that opportunity.
And I guess equally, we're always learning as well. So, and I think, me as an as an employer, looking at people that are continuing their education. So you may have your hands-on type job there, but giving up your time to do that further education is really valuable because it shows your commitment. And that leads into what Alistair was saying earlier about that volunteering again, isn't it? It's kind of, when people are coming into this sector, to show that people are kind of giving up more of their own free time to do that volunteering, to have some further education, is a real positive and a kind of real plus as an employer there. No, that's a really, really great responses there. And I think if anything, that's what it's all about. It's showing that the next generation that there are opportunities there. It's not just about, sitting in front of a screen learning. It's about that you do have that opportunity for that hands-on approach, even with that educational style of approach there. So then if we go on to our next question, now this is always the kind of tricky one, looking into the future. It's always a tough one. But what do you think the workforce is going to look like in 10 years' time, particularly if we think about how technology is evolving? So if we think about things like the metaverse, AI, robotics, and how technology is going to affect that. So Rachel, let's hear from you first.
I loved this question when I got sent this question, because it was a really, really nice one to think about. And I started off thinking about, what were the exciting technologies that I'm excited to see and how they're going to impact our industry. And then I went back and looked at the question, how does the workforce look in 10 years? And I realised actually the most exciting impact that perhaps the metaverse, AI, robotics and other technology might be on how the introduction of those technologies enables us to diversify our workforce, enables us to recruit people into our industry that perhaps wouldn't have come into our industry previously. Certainly from my experience, there are more conventional, tried and tested routes of finding our way into our industry. I'm sure we've all got stories of how we accidentally ended up in the industry. But actually, these new technologies, these approaches, and the opportunity they give us will probably, hopefully, attract different people from different backgrounds, different communities, different places in the world to actually join the live events industry, who maybe wouldn't have been aware that there'd be a career opportunity available to them before. So that's the bit that I think is really exciting, is what will the workforce both look like and be like in 10 years because of what this new technology enables the workforce to be. On top of that, I mean, obviously, there's hugely exciting things in terms of, how many more methods of content consumption will there be for live events?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole other industry, a whole other world, and I think that's really exciting stuff. But I think for me, the future facing part of it is the people, and what does that workforce look like?
And I think if we look at things now and all the different facets to the events industry and the technical side of things, that's only going to get even vaster now. There's so many opportunities that coming up. If we think about what the metaverse could look like, the creating of this metaverse, these rooms, the graphics that's going to be involved. There's a lot of back end programmers that need to be involved in doing that. You wouldn't normally think that that's an event sector sort of industry type role, but that's still going to be very, very valuable. Just thinking particularly about the metaverse there. So Alistair, what do you think how that's gonna look?
Well, totally agree with both Gavin and Rachel's suggestions already. But I think that when people say, especially when you talk about AI and the workforce combined, I think some people's maybe gut or fear reaction is that, it's robots are going to start taking over, or AI algorithms are going to start taking over people's jobs and things like that. And whilst some jobs might become not necessarily redundant but replaced by AI. I think we have a workforce that is still kept, but it changes in the sense of it becomes their role to maintain those things. I was thinking the other day about AI. There's so many different bots and things like that you can add now to Zoom meetings that do things for you. They take the minutes, they announce things. You can do all sorts of kind of moderation purely with an AI kind of algorithm. But what that does is it replaces a person doing that moderation, but you need someone to look after the actual device, the account, all the technology that's behind that and maintain that. So it doesn't necessarily remove jobs, I don't think, but it creates new, different jobs that are perhaps more technological. And of course, events industry, 10 years time, we're definitely going to be dealing with even more technology. I think that by that time, we'll probably be full on replacing in-person events with the metaverse. So whatever that's going to look like in terms of, again, the skill set that's needed for the architects to kind of design all of that, for the programmers, etc. So I definitely think we're heading in a direction of even more sort of emphasis on technology, and we'll need a workforce that can both plan and organize that, but also handle the technology and the coding and the detailed things behind it. So yeah, I guess thinking about that kind of theme, something is that I'm always trying to do and learn is about how to implement these technologies and sort of talk to clients about them. It's about not being afraid of them and not saying, oh, it will never replace or never become the norm, because I reckon in 10 years, the metaverse will certainly be the norm. So getting ahead or getting on board those trends as soon as you can to understand those kind of things is only going to benefit us and the workforce and the people that we employ in 10 years' time.
No, absolutely. And I think with all these things, all these machines, AI, robotics, and the metaverse, they all still kind of need to be taught, don't they? They still need to get their information from somewhere. And yeah, lots of these things are self-learning, but there's still that human common sense approach that needs to be taken. We've seen it with kind of live demos of these bots out there. Yes, you can answer them the great questions. They're going to search their database and answer it based on the results that they get. But there's still that element of common sense. And like you're saying, we still need people to manage that. We still need that human to implement some of this technology. We still need to put it in place, and we still need to educate people how to use these things as well. And yes, bots, AI can do all of that, but there's still that initial kind of training that almost needs to happen, in that management of it and that setting up. Thinking about the metaverse, now metaverse is something that's really close to my heart as well. And I think we're kind of almost tiptoeing into it a little bit just by doing virtual meetings. I remember 15 years ago, we did have this technology here, meeting with using our webcams and using things like Skype and MSN back in the day, but it never really took off. And I think, if anything, COVID has kind of forced that. The technology isn't really new. It's just people are using it, and now it's kind of advanced there. And ironically, we are kind of tiptoeing into it, but we're just using our faces. So actually take it to the next level with the metaverse. People will be completely immersed in that. What sort of roles, Al, do you think, could we still be seeing there? Do you think we'll still see the same sort of event manager type roles there? Somebody to kind of, is going to need to put on these events, they're going to need to manage them. Do you think that, do you think those roles are still going to be there?
Well, firstly, I love that you called MSN the metaverse. I've never, I guess it was sort of a barrier into it. When people have explained the metaverse to me, there's sort of, I think it's 2D, 3D and immersive. So I guess MSN sits on the 2D side. Yeah, I think that there'll be more kind of specialist roles, would be my guess or assumption. So you'd still have your kind of what I'd call on-site event manager plugged into kind of the headsets, meeting the audience members in the metaverse, checking they're okay, checking how to use everything. But then I would imagine that you would need someone also unplugged from the metaverse, having a look and checking the settings, the functions, everything that's going on in the back end is running, and sort of almost being the button pusher, making sure all of those things go live when it happens, almost like a producer type role. But I would certainly assume that the roles that we have face to face will be replicated in the metaverse, but then you're going to need people during that event unplugged from the metaverse to almost be your operators, your people that aren't necessarily on the ground or in the ground running things, but are keeping an eye on everything from a kind of top level, making sure that that's all set and ready to go.
And over to you, Rachel. Do you think, like thinking about the education sector, the areas that you're in, Is that starting to gear up for things like the metaverse? Is that kind of on your scope now to start kind of thinking about what educational tools you need to start implementing?
Absolutely, and it's one of those things that with education, it's always a little bit of a chicken and egg, because in some ways, actually, it's really useful for educational establishments just to write courses that include it, because then that sort of pushes the argument a little bit. But we've always kind of got to wait till we know what sort of direction it is and have the people who can then actually teach it as well to be able to do it. So it's a bit of a challenge. You've sometimes got, and this is what I mean about being pioneering, sometimes you've just got to go out there and kind of try something new and change up your course content every year, as we always do anyway, because everything changes. And I think it's about the people and finding the people that can actually talk about it. It's one of the issues with virtual production at the moment is that it's relatively, still in terms of the workflows, still relatively quite pioneering. So for that knowledge to then trickle down, take some time to get through to education, not just in terms of higher education, further education, schools, for people to become aware of it and to realise that might be a career path I want to go down.
No, absolutely. And that's a really good point, isn't it? It's that experience versus education kind of coming back again, isn't it? We've got to have experienced people to be able to build the education to educate that next generation that certainly comes in. And I just think personally, like I was saying earlier, such a big potential opportunity for everybody. And I think that, everybody in the sector kind of needs to open up their mind to it. Especially the new people coming into this sector, because there could be some really great opportunities there that are not kind of your typical event manager or producer or technician type roles there. So I think, I
think the roles for this haven't been invented yet, and I think that's the really exciting part about all of this. Is that's what I mean about not being afraid to be a pioneer. Is don't try and go for give yourself a job title. Actually, the most interesting people are the people I know who who don't have a job title, because they're changing it up every day, because what they're doing is so cutting edge. Well, today I'm a this, but tomorrow I'm a that. So that's I think where it's really interesting.
And I think that kind of leads into something that something else we've kind of been talking about, is that kind of employed stroke freelance type approach. Are people going to be a bit more freelancer, where they can wear multiple hats depending on what sector they're kind of working in, whether it be that live event, whether that be in the metaverse, or whether it be that virtual kind of engineer? Do you think we'll kind of see more of a shift towards that freelancer type approach over employed? Alistair, what's your sort of thoughts on that?
It's a tricky question. I think that I personally have seen in recent years, coming out of COVID, the rise of kind of personal brand. So even if someone works for or is employed full time by a company, they have their own sort of unique personal brand surrounding them. And it might be that is part of their role, but also they do volunteering or they have a side hustle. I think that we're going to move away from kind of conventional, this is my job title and this is what I do, and I don't do anything outside of this role. I think we're going to see more kind of portfolio type individuals that will, work or be employed either by freelance or by contract for, company X, but also work on the side with production or have experience in X, Y, and Z. I think especially sort of building on what we were saying there about the metaverse, it's kind of an unlimited environment. Anything can happen in this kind of metaverse. It has so much potential. And I think that as we move to hosting events within that, I think that's going to open up so many more diverse and different roles. And I don't think that it's possible to have one person fulfilling all of those, but also that the workforce is going to need experience in bits and pieces of those. So I definitely think that it will be kind of like Rachel saying, so people that don't necessarily have a job title, or perhaps even someone that they work for constantly 100% of the time, it will be that they are an expert in this, so they're sourced where they need to be within the metaverse or outside of it.
No, that's great. And how about you, Rachel? What's your sort of thoughts on the freelance versus employed type role?
I think we'll see an increase in creative clustering. So being a freelancer and being on your own is one thing. Actually, for all the things that we've described and the different skill sets, finding people that you can work with who bring something else to the party and being able to sell yourself to a client as a package, I think we'll probably see more of those, because that enables people to maintain that level of specialism and that flexibility. But also, pragmatically, as a freelancer, managing the workload, particularly in a growing and demanding area of practice, which, this obviously is. We see that, again, in other areas of the industry. There's so much work, people can't manage it. And actually, if you're a creative cluster, you to actually share some of that work around ensures that you've got constant work coming through, but enables you to have a little bit of work-life balance, which is also really important in terms of people's well-being and also their personal growth and scope.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I actually thinking about that cluster sort of approach and how people kind of can come together and utilize that skill sets to offer that sort of package is a really interesting approach. Wonderful. So I've got one more question. Now, I think this is a really hard question, to be honest with you. So to wrap up, I'm going to come to you first. Alistair, what would you say to 18-year-old Alistair if you were just starting out in the industry?
Well, what I would say, Gavin, based on the conversation that we've had here, I think, and looking forward to the future workforce as well, would be to focus less on an end result and focus more on what's happening in the now and working on transferable skills. Because as we've talked there, in 10 years' time, things are going to be completely different. None of us knew what the workforce would look like coming out of the COVID pandemic times. And there was a real need to kind of be agile. So I would say working on cross-transferable skills, keeping an agile kind of mindset, and focusing on not only what's happening now and in current, but trying to be a little bit ahead of the trends and other things that are going on, so that you can be that, I think Rachel was using the word pioneer, you can be the person pioneering that kind of change and that update in the future, and sort of laying down that job security for yourself within that industry by being a little bit ahead of the curve.
No, there's some really nice points there. So Rachel, over to you. What would you say to 18-year-old Rachel starting out in this sector?
Don't do it. No, I would say absolutely do it. No, I would say I'd absolutely recommend the industry and the life to anybody. But what I would say is that sometimes as an industry we can have a bit of a habit of looking inwards on ourselves, and to be a pioneering kind of practitioner, look at what's going on outside of the industry. Look at wider and broader change, because we are a bit of a magpie industry. We steal the best bits of innovation from lots of other industries and then we apply it ourselves. And so, if you're interested in AI, robotics, the metaverse, actually look at and see how other people are applying it, and then think about, well, how might that then be applied in terms of what we're doing? Not necessarily just to replicate practice that's already going on, but future practice and blue sky thinking. And I think having the ability to be able to step out of what you're doing day to day and to have a bigger picture will then help give you a lot more confidence when you're making decisions about what you want to do. And the other thing I'd say is find the best possible people to work with. A job might not be the most exciting job in the world, but the people that you're working with might be absolutely fantastic practitioners, mentors, brilliant people to work with, and they will help you progress your career and help you become the professional that you want to be. So so people and broader viewpoints.
Yeah, and I really like your point about our sector is a bit of a magpie. You're right. We do kind of look on the outside and kind of, take elements and see how we can implement them there. So it's kind of, and I think me answering that question is kind of like what you guys were saying as well, and having that broad knowledge and kind of keep your eyes open. Also, networking is really key. Sometimes it's not really what you know, it's who you know, is that can really open up some doors and present you with opportunities that you didn't even know existed. And I think that feels to me the theme there, that there are lots of different opportunities there, and it's just about knowing what's out there and what you can kind of go into and what you can add to. So I think that they are all really, really great points, and it's really nice to kind of see about what your 18-year-old versions would do about now. So that pretty much wraps up today's session as well. And there's some real key points there that that have come through. And just to kind of summarize some of those is that ultimately there's multiple pathways into the industry. We have apprenticeships, we've got volunteering, and it's all about finding some of these routes that's going to suit the individual. So these are kind of baby steps that people can do that maybe not quite prepared yet to go into a full education or go into a full-time job, but use some of these routes there to kind of get a flavour for the industry and see what sectors are within there that you might be interested in there. We've talked about that education proves a much more in-depth and technical knowledge. So it kind of gives you those foundations there so you can implement that knowledge and then use it within that hands-on approach to give you that kind of much broader experience knowledge there. We've understood that the great impact of technology, it allows us to diversify our workforce, which I think is really, really exciting as well. Just having those different areas that people can work in. And with the increase of things like the AI and the metaverse, doesn't mean that all of the event sector, all of us as production managers and technicians are going to be out of jobs and that robots are going to kind of take over the world. To me, it means that there's new roles there that we're going to need to manage some of those sectors, but those roles are still going to be very much there. And ultimately, as a big believer of the metaverse, absolutely, we are still human beings and we are still going to want and need to meet individually as well as collectively in a face-to-face environment. So as much as we talk about the metaverse and how great it is, we still need that human interaction from time to time. And then ultimately, if we think about the freelancer and employment kind of world, we might see a shift there, and people may be working a little bit more as an individual, as a freelancer type thing, but collectively we can kind of go on and do bigger and better things. So actually, having your network in there, having your contacts, having fellow freelancers, in a similar field, but actually, it's different kind of skill set could be really valuable in going forward. So before we wrap up today's session, over to you, Alistair. Any kind of final tips of advice before we wrap up now?
I think definitely try and pulling all of this together. I think get yourself on LinkedIn if you're thinking of coming into the events industry, connect with people, follow people. LinkedIn is a great place that I found quite a big community focused around events, and it's certainly opened my eyes into how many different roles and, as Gavin said, facets that there are of the events industry. I'd also try and get yourself to like industry events as well. They can be a great place to network. Things like IMEX, lots of them can be free to attend. If you meet certain criteria, you can pop along, visit some suppliers and network and meet some of the people and see what the industry is actually like before sort of joining it, and try and integrate yourself and see where you might fit in with your skill set.
Great, thank you so much. And Rachel, just before we close out, any final kind of wonderful words of wisdom?
I'd say if you're looking at different courses, look at as many as possible, talk to the tutors, talk to the students, go to the sites, see what people are doing, see whether it's the way that you want to learn. And then from a sort of a personal point of view, remember it shouldn't all be work. Have fun, and also be the sort of person that people want to spend 18 hours a day with if you're working on site. So have fun, be fun, and enjoy yourself.
No, from both of you, I think they're really, really great points. So with that, it's been an absolute pleasure hearing from you both, and I think it's been really valuable, hopefully to all of our watchers, and certainly some really great insights there, even for me to take home there as well. So thank you both so much for joining me today. It's been absolutely wonderful having you a part of today's Remote Lounge.